So we're going to start off by doing a little overrated, underrated in the hobby. Now, I should say, specifically in the hobby, because some of these guys are good players, and I think that some of these guys are going to have successful careers in Major League Baseball, but just for our purposes, and especially looking at what other guys get, or what you can buy other cards for, there are going to be some better options. So we'll throw out some of the underrated or the overrated ones and try to give you some maybe better options. And I want to get your thoughts too, Doug, on some of these guys. Dan is not in here, and he would be pretty furious if he heard my very first guy that I'm about to mention. Again, a guy I like. But Ryan Mountcastle, I think, is getting on a little bit of the overrated side right now. He had 33 home runs last year in Baltimore, had some good numbers in his rookie year. And if you look at some of the metrics, he has pretty good numbers so far, although his on-base percentage is .299 right now through 117 plate appearances. And he's a good player, but he took a while to get to the majors.
Yep.
He's 25 years old this year. Not old, but for collectors' sakes,
it's ancient.
Want, like, he's only in his second full season.
Yep.
And he's already 25. He plays in Baltimore. I mean, we have seen also a lot of big potential power hitters come out of Baltimore. I'm thinking of like Trey Mancini, of Mark Trumbo, these guys who had good major league careers.
Or even like guys that have stopped by, like Nelson Cruz and stuff like that.
A lot of guys who are good, but they just don't carry in the hobby. So unless the Orioles can get really good really fast, and it can happen because they've got a lot of good young talent, I don't know if the ceiling gets any higher for Ryan Mountcastle. I should mention, looked up some of his recent sales. An orange First Bowman auto that sold just prior to the season starting. A BGS 9.5 sold for $3,300. Where are you at with Ryan Mountcastle? You thinking are we rightfully calling him just slightly overrated?
I think so, and you know, you even look at, you know, and I don't want to cross sports, but you even look at some of the Ravens guys. I feel like, you know, guys on the Ravens don't get the love they have.
Baltimore
like Hollywood
just isn't good.
Just I don't know what it is. And you know, obviously Cal Ripken got a lot of love, different era of collecting, you know, not so much the autographs and the first Bowmans during his era, but you know, and you got Adley Rushman waiting in the wings. Heston Kjerstad as well, I believe, is still in the system. And I don't know. I'm not big on Adley either, but I just don't know if you want to hit your hat and really invest heavily in Ryan Mountcastle.
Yeah, it's again, I think he can have a good career, and you know, we're going to talk about a guy who did start with Baltimore that I think is on the flip side of all this, a guy we've talked about a few times. But I think that this team, as I mentioned, has got to get good pretty fast for that investment to go forward. Now, if you invested in him early on, his stuff was pretty cheap, real early on, and he's been a long-term hold. So good on you. I just don't know if he is worth that, I think, now post-rookie season hype that he has gotten. I have noticed the recent sales have slowed down a little bit as he's been slumping, so maybe things pick up again. But if you're looking for an alternative, he's been mentioned a few times on the show already as, to me, which says, then let's get in on this guy. It's Paul Goldschmidt, as much as it amazes me to say it as a Giants fan.
I know.
He took them up deep again over the weekend. But Paul Goldschmidt, same exact card of his, a First Bowman orange auto, sold April 22nd for $1,600, about $1,700 rounding up. To me, that is a no-brainer for a guy that I think 3, 4, 5 more good years, which doesn't feel like a stretch in St. Louis, is a guy that I think is a potential Hall of Famer. So
yeah, I don't disagree. You know, and this guy that I'm going to mention now might be on your list too. Joey Votto, another guy who just doesn't get a lot of love, and I almost put like Goldschmidt and Votto in the same categories, that they put up Hall of Fame type numbers. But I don't know if they're just quiet. I know Votto's not quiet a lot of times.
He's got a big personality for sure.
But just for whatever reason, he's not on anybody's list. You know, it's like you don't see you don't go on Twitter and see like I'm a Votto super collector. Now I'm sure there is some of them out there, but just not as much as like a Tatis or a Vlad. And I mean, I'm not going to say that Goldschmidt's overrated. Maybe I lean more towards underrated, but I don't know what it is about Goldschmidt. It's almost like a Buster Posey effect.
You know, I think it's also something I realize as we're talking about a lot of these guys of this era that they are not the Pujols. They're not like jump out at you maybe as the guys from 10 years prior, like Pujols and Ichiro, who were sort of these transcendent players. So of course, even in hobby, even when the hobby was not what it was, those guys just were so talented and so special and so important for the game that they were going to pop. Whereas now you are in this weird in-between zone, like those guys who came up in 2010, 11, 12, where unless you were Trout or Harper, I think a lot of the attention probably got focused on those guys, laser focused on them. And so these other guys who are their contemporaries, who have been great, have had great careers, just kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and Goldschmidt is in 2011 Bowman, which had the very first Bryce Harper paper auto. So, and I think Brandon Belt had a little bit more. He was in that set as well, and he had more hype. Obviously, we see now that I'd rather have a Goldschmidt than Belt, but like that era just belongs to Harper, especially that set. And I think you're seeing a lot of collectors still holding on to some of those early Harpers instead of Goldschmidts.
Yeah, exactly.
And almost compare it to a band. It's like I feel like a Goldschmidt and a Votto are not a singer in a band. They're like the drummer or the guitarist. Section. Yes. They're like the heartbeat of their team, but they're just not lead singer.
I like Votto a lot. I do wonder, like, because I think he has grown in appreciation among, especially, he came up at like the perfect time where like advanced stats were really becoming such a it's now commonplace in the game to talk about that. And like you look at his numbers and he benefits from really digging into those advanced stats where you realize just how good and how important he is. I mean, just watching him where you just see the way like literally his body adjusts at the plate, the way he chokes up, like it's a very Barry Bonds move to just choke up as you get to that 0-2 count to fight off some pitches. And Votto is one of the few guys I feel like in baseball where he's making those like those little details that are easy to
and I mean maybe the lack of hardware for those guys, right? I mean championships MVP, and you're right. You know, I know they have gold gloves and stuff too, but you know,
MVP for Votto, but now it's grown on over a decade since that happened, about a decade. Yeah, you're right. I think that's part of it. The location. I mean, now Goldschmidt, I think playing in St. Louis is doing him a lot of favors, whereas Votto has been in Cincinnati for his entire career and has had maybe 2-3 playoff appearances altogether. So we'll see what happens with him down the road. I don't know if he gets that bump that like Cabrera and Pujols are getting here in their final year, because he's not going to hit those big landmark numbers. Right.
And is he the only one that's has there been anybody on the team with him that period of time? Probably not. Right?
I mean, you had Brandon Phillips was probably his best running mate. Adam Dunn, I think there maybe. Well, no, probably was. He and Adam Dunn didn't cross over.
No.
It's Cueto was there during those great years. But there was never a guy with Votto that I think he was doing it in tandem with that lasted a long enough time. To
you kind of see. Look at some of the greats. You know, you got even Posey, who doesn't sell, but you know he's had Bumgarner that whole time, Pence. And he had Crawford for the majority of the time.
Right. And now in St. Louis, you've got Goldschmidt doing it with Arenado, and I think that's going to benefit both of those guys in the long run in the hobby and in their career. Let's get positive and talk about a guy that I think is extremely underrated. I mentioned Baltimore Orioles. I've mentioned him on the show already, but he's worth mentioning again because Manny Machado, going into now we're a couple weeks away from Memorial Day, again, one of those markers in the baseball season, is your league leader in batting average, on base, and OPS and hits. He is approaching 1,500 hits. He's 29.
Yeah.
We always say, man, it doesn't, like when Cabrera got 3,000, you looked at who was ready, who was next, and it was like, that's going to be hard to see anybody. And then you look at Machado and you go, wait a minute. He's 29 years old. He's going to be 1,500 hits. Yeah. He's already got 258 career home runs. I think, as we mentioned, the only thing he's missing is postseason success. He's got, I think, one ALCS appearance in Baltimore. Maybe that happens in San Diego with Fernando Tatis, but a PSA 10 2010 Bowman Chrome Auto sold on May 14th for $639, which to me is the steal of the century, considering that this is a guy that is going to be a third baseman who could potentially hit 500 home runs and 3,000 hits.
Yeah. I think, and I have no doubt. I'll say right now that he's underrated, but I think there's a likability with him that I think prevents a lot of people from, how what did he cleat somebody on a base path? He's had some questionable tactics. He's talked bad about some of his teammates over time, and I know that doesn't translate to wins or losses, but I think in the hobby, people like the guy that's likable, and but you can't deny if he gets to the point of those stats that you just said that his cards are going to go up no matter how much of an a-hole he is.
Yeah, and I think that he has to do a lot to fight off that reputation, and I think since he's gotten to San Diego, he has tried.
Yeah,
and last year, fair or not, he was seen as like, well, now you are the guy. I mean, it's crazy to think, like, again, he's not even 30 yet, but he is the veteran leader of that team with a team when, you got young stars like Tatis there. And there was that blow up in the dugout last year as the Padres were spiraling downward. That was another mark against him, I think, for everyone who's saying he's got an attitude problem. I still think he's got enough time to turn the tide. Harper had that against him for a long time of like, he's a hothead, he's too much. And I think now the tide has turned. I think the same thing's going to happen to Machado. He's really talented, and Tatis coming back to that lineup, he's only going to do him favors, I think, with where he is in the hobby. I mean, I couldn't believe that when I read that. I know it does range. There are some really, really expensive high-end Machado cards, but the fact that you can get some really good cards of his for under $1,000.
Yeah.
To me, that's
a fun set. That's actually 2010 Bowman draft.
Yes.
And he was one of the bigger names coming out of the gate, along with Bubba Starling, who didn't quite pan out. But, Bubba Starling was 11. But the 10, I think it was Gary Brown, Christian Arroyo, some guys that did not pan out. And, and his card was in there. And it's live, too. So if you're looking at some of that 2010 Bowman draft, might be a good one to scoop up.
Yeah, that's definitely not a bad set to grab. Considering that, I mean, just him alone, I think makes it worth it. All right, we're gonna go to a position Machado used to play. Another one where there might be people listening going, "Man, you're really digging for the overrated guys," but I think he's worth mentioning. It's a guy I like. I'm starting to think Bo Bichette might be slightly overrated in the trading card market. I saw a red PSA 10 auto, first Bowman, sold for $84,000.
Jeez.
One of his. He's a great player. He's a really good player. I think he's going to have a great future. Had a really good year last year. He's off to a really slow start, though, this year. Yeah. I think he'll eventually turn it around. But I compare that to, like, I look at his numbers, and he's off to a hotter start than the guy I'm about to mention. But Xander Bogaerts, who's had a very nice career in Boston World Series, a consistent 25 to 30 home run threat at shortstop. And I think I noticed two cards, exact same type of cards, a gold first Bowman auto, both graded to 10. Bichette sold for $8,000 and Bogart sold for $2,000. Now, that's where I say that's where the overrated part comes in for me, because how much better, like, let's say that Bichette does what he's been doing, which is essentially what Bogaerts has been doing. And Bogaerts plays in Boston.
Yeah.
So basically, the logic says if this tracks, these two guys are going to have the same about the same value when Bichette reaches that age 28, 29 season. Maybe it changes because it's a different hobby when Bichette comes in. There's more invested into him. But I guess that's where I say the overrated part, a little maybe buyer beware. Just be aware that if you're buying into him or you just bought into him, I think that even if he has a great career, that it's destined to fall a little bit here.
Yeah, and you'll probably see, I mean, I remember another Red Sox, Mookie Betts, who probably still doesn't sell for as much as Bichette does. I could be wrong, but
yeah, I would say it's just a shade under, honestly.
Yeah,
and look at what he's accomplished.
And maybe people are worried about Xander Bogaerts not being able to be a Red Sox for very long. Yeah, I don't know.
He could get traded this midseason,
right? So maybe people are latching more onto Bichette, but like with Bichette, it's like that's Vlad's team to me.
Yep.
So I mean, if anybody's going to sell on the Blue Jays, they're going to be good. It's good because of Vlad.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree that he could be overrated based on his name and based on being, playing for the Blue Jays. And I believe he is 16 Bowman regular, I think. or maybe Bowman draft. I can't remember. And then I think Bogarts is 13. So
yeah, 13 for Bogarts. Yeah, I think you said it with this Vlad, who, by the way, I think we mentioned it on an episode of The Hype that same exact type of card for Vlad sold for $500,000.
Right.
Vlad's off to a really slow start right now.
Yeah.
Blue Jays have been kind of scuffling
Yeah.
lately, so not a reason to get out on those guys.
No.
I believe in Vlad, but yeah, I think that's also something to keep in mind, that it's 3-4 years from now. It's going to be Vlad with Bichette as the sidekick. I think that was always the thought, but 2020 maybe made people think maybe it's going to be Bichette. So again, I think he's still got a great future ahead of him. If he has a career like a Xander Bogaerts or Trevor Story, and when they hit 30 years old, like, he's going to be a great career. But $84,000, I'm not so sure. That's pretty steep. Again, it's a red, but nonetheless. Last guy, who is sort of the definition of do not invest heavily super early. I think you already know what I'm going to talk about. It's a Yankee. It's Jason Dominguez. I really wish that I was not just always talking about why this is too much to invest in this guy. I wish that I could come on here and say, wow, Jason Dominguez is great. I am wrong. Good for him. Good for the Yankees. Good for the hobby. This is awesome. Through 123 plate appearances, though, in low A. He's back in low A, it should be mentioned.
Wow.
He has to repeat in low A. He's 19. I know you're screaming. He's only 19. What were
Give
you
him some
doing?
time,
What were you doing when you were 19? I get it. But 233 average, 276 on base, 388 slugging, 43 strikeouts versus 7 walks so far this season. It's not good, and he's doing worse than he was a year ago. All that to say that his gold superfractor PSA 10 auto sold on Golden Auctions for just $100,000 less than that red Vlad Guerrero Jr. $474,000.
That's when the hype of a player doesn't like
Absolutely.
It's like the Zion effect in
Right.
basketball. Like, Zion hasn't done anything, but the name is just, everybody wants that name.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it got to a point where even those base chrome cards with no autos, if they were graded well, were selling for like $200, $300, $400.
Yeah.
They're still selling for about $100 right now. Man, this is just the biggest buyer beware is right here. And again, I want him to succeed. I know he's only 19, but
In what position? Is he an outfielder?
he's an outfielder.
Okay.
It's just not happening. And I think to make it worse is there are articles coming out from scouts who are just saying it just looks like he's taking a step back. And if you are someone who invested in him,
Must have a hole in his swing somewhere, obviously, right? I haven't watched a whole lot of his at bats.
Watch a little bit, and he's just swinging at everything. Totally undisciplined, which, again, if you're 19, that happens. You're going to grow into it. But for the second straight year and for how much was invested, I mean, maybe I would be one that maybe I'm going to sound like I'm going to eat crow one day, but I just would get out now.
Yeah.
Got to get out right now.
Yeah, I would love to go against you, but I've been watching the decline of his cards, and I think I have a blue somewhere of his, and it's just been frustrating to see his like 200 batting average or lower than that. I think at one point it was like almost 100, and then it's just not been improving. And like you said, he is 19, but at some point, I mean, Ronald Acuna was 19.
Right. Juan Soto was 19 in the majors, hitting 22 homers.
Exactly.
And that's the thing when you say, wow, I can't believe that Acuna's this much or Soto's this much. They were teenagers doing that in the major leagues. There's a reason they're that much. Dominguez is not.
And a lot of guys can hit a fastball 500 feet, but
right,
it's the guys that can hit the curves and the sliders and the off speeds and the if pitchers in the lower level have figured you out.
Yeah.
What's going to happen when you're facing a Verlander or you're facing, a Greinke or some of these guys that are going to just blow you away with their stuff. That's it. I mean, I know these guys overseas are taught to hit home runs because that's
That's what'll get you up in the
yeah, and that's there's a lot of them out there, and they're all some of them are relatively poor families, and this is their meal ticket, and hitting the ball the opposite way for a single is not going to get you looked at, and the massive amount of home runs is, and that's what got him looked at, and that's what got him on the squad. But if he can't hit off speed, if he can't hit curveballs, then
the good news is time is on his side. And
yeah.
Again, Soto and Acuna, these are exceptions to the rule. There's a reason they're huge, because they don't come around very often. These are once, twice in a generation sort of guys. So Dominguez may not be that once in a generation guy. And I think that if you were a collector of his, you might have to just take a step back and say, if you really believe in him, say, that's okay. It's okay that he's not a once in a generation guy. He could still be a great player. He could still come up at 22 years old. That's a while from now. And completely have changed the entire narrative about him. There's a lot of time.
There's a couple guys, and this is a name from the past, and as a Giants fan, a name that comes to my mind. He didn't have the hype that he did, but Angel Villalona.
Yeah.
Very similar makeup. There's also a guy on the White Sox, Dan Viciedo. Kind of same body of work, where it's like guys are hitting 500-foot home runs. Like, he's just crushing the ball. But they just never got to the point where they could hit big league pitching.
Yeah. It's going to be about. He's still so young. If he can get patient, get that swing, discipline, then he could have a great career ahead of him. And again, the Yankees are not in a rush to bring him up. They've got plenty of time. And again, if you're a Yankee fan who's thinking, "Oh no, the prospects," they got plenty of other good prospects there as well. Volpe among them at the top of the list. But I think if you're looking at the most overrated player in the hobby right now, it's kind of year number 2 where we're saying it's Jason Dominguez, and until proven otherwise, he's going to be the guy that I think is just too much was invested in him too early. Thanks so much for checking out this clip of Wax Packs and Warning Tracks, Mojobreak's Baseball Card Podcast. If you want to hear the entire episode, make sure to click that link down below in the description, or better yet, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Just search Mojobreak Sports Card Show. That's Mojobreak Sports Card Show wherever you get podcasts, and you'll get new episodes of Wax Packs and Warning Tracks every Tuesday, plus new episodes of our flagship podcast, The Hype, every Thursday. And of course, make sure to subscribe to Mojobreak Media for more podcasts, more clips, and more original videos right here. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to like the videos, and we will see you next time.